where to start with this Hangkai 48 volt 1200 watt electric boat motor. A good friend of mine, Wayne, bought this to analyze and do a comparison video on. And when it arrived at his location, it looked like it had been returned or fallen off a truck or both. So it was in really, really tough shape. And the box was torn, styrofoam was torn, and that wasn't the least of it. The other issues this had, besides looking like it had been through a war, was the throttle control had been torn out. So these wires here were all frayed. There was some tape, some black tape on one of them, and they had been popped off. And under more close review, they kind of had been busted off or pulled off the throttle connection assembly inside the handle here. So because those connections are so small, a new handle would have to be ordered at the least to see if this system would work. The first thought with receiving a motor that was this banged up would be to return it. And a lot of times the sellers on eBay, you've got to pay for return shipping. And getting this from the East Coast back to California is over $100. The motors are usually around $200, a little bit less, a little bit more. And it just didn't make sense to spend all that money to return it. You're not going to be reimbursed for the shipping, and you're going to have to eat that. So it just didn't make sense to return it. So Wayne asked me, he said, "Do you want it?" And I said, "Sure. We'll get into it. We'll open it up. We'll see exactly what's going on in here and kind of go from there." And I was a little bit torn between running this just stock or doing what I usually do, which is to tweak and modify and go in a different direction with this. So I think that's what we're going to do. So some of the first things I noticed with this, the propeller, of course, is plastic. The shaft, this is aluminum, so this is metal. And from what I've gathered so far, and what we're going to do is we're going to take off the prop, open up the lower unit, and analyze that and see if there's oil in there. I've seen some videos that show that there is some oil in there from the factory. I have no idea what the weight is, or if it's proper oil or grease, or if it's just what was left over from something else. You can buy a metal prop for about $10 on Amazon. I've seen some people do that. It actually does have a sacrificial anode, a zinc anode there, which was surprising to me. It does articulate up. There is a locking pin on the side, so you can kick it up out of the water. I was surprised about that too. Another problem that this one had when it got to Wayne's house is there's a split, a crack in the plastic housing here, and a crack that goes into the cover on the top as well. So this thing has seen some hits. To power this motor, we need a 48 volt system, and you can use 4 12 volts, you can use 2 24 volts, or you can buy a 48 volt battery for this or for other 48 volt needs. My 48 volt batteries that I've used for the other motors I have are currently set up as a solar battery bank in my house. Do another video later on about some of the panels and some of that setup. But for the time being, and to run this motor, we're going to use the battery pack that came with the Spirit 1.0. I've already taken this apart, so the warranty is long voided, and I figured out the way this is set up. You can't just plug something in here and expect to get 48 or 50 volts out of it. So we're going to have to make some pigtails, run a wire out, put some Anderson connectors on here so we can plug it into this, as well as anything else that we want to have a 48 volt battery system for. As far as the cowling goes here, the reason we've got 5 on the back here is they make 2-stroke gas engines, and you can see the hole here for the pull start cord, and this is just a mix and match kind of thing. So this is not consistent with the electronics that are inside of there. No matter how you slice it, physics, the relationship between volts, amps, and watts, that doesn't work. So before we get inside of this and showing the way that this is set up in there, For the switch here, plug it in, you can't pull it out. And I don't think that does anything on that stage. You turn it to on, and then there is a volt readout on the top to give you an idea of what your battery level is. For using lithium or lithium iron phosphate batteries, voltage is a really rough estimation. It'll give you a rough idea what's going on, but it's not an amp counter, and it's not going to really tell you how much juice is left in the battery. Popping this off, pop our cowling off here. We got two little tabs on this side. Let's let this guy off. We've got a very simple setup here. And on some of the other motors that I've built, it's the same setup. And for DIY electric boat motors, it's the same setup. You've got a motor mounted to the shaft, and you've got a controller here. You can buy e-bike kits online that have all this stuff together with a throttle, or you can buy a piecemeal and set it up on your own. As far as this motor goes, this is just air-cooled. There's no water being pumped up into here. No idea how hot this would get. And I don't know the specs on this controller here, but I am going to replace this. And we'll go into that in just a second. About a year ago, there was a special on Amazon, and I got a deal on an e-bike, a 2000 watt e-bike motor kit. And it came with the controller, throttle, the keys for the throttle there, of course the plugs that are wired in, and a 2000 watt motor. From the specs that I've seen for this is a 1200 watt motor. Who knows? I think that's probably, it looks like about a 1200 watt motor. I know this is a 2001. The difference is, one of the main issues with this is there are no cooling fins on this, and I'm not sure yet how these attach to the shaft on the inside there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our controller here in place of this controller, also because the throttle can't connect here, and I've got a throttle that will connect with this controller. We may need to make some modifications here because with the cowling on, this is shorter, this controller is bigger, but we're going to see if we can get that in there. And then see if this will run. And then we will investigate the lower unit, the oil status, and kind of go from there. The controller, as in that last clip, was just zip tied to the front of the motor. There was nothing that was truly anchored down to the base of the mount here. And I was hoping there would be some stickers or some information on the actual unit here that would give some more data. And the only thing we've got is a little bit of laser engraved information here. And I'll do some research and look that up. 18G, 48 volt, and a serial number. And we're going to pull this out, disconnect this, and see how the other controller I've got will line up in this cowling. The wiring for these is really pretty standard, pretty simple. There's a lot of information online, and depending on which information data bits you want from the hall sensors or whatever on here, you can usually figure out what you need to set it up. Pulling off the original controller that came with this, and they do have nylocks here, which is good. I guess I'm surprised at anything. So we've got nylocks on there, and the gauge for these is really about right for this 48 volt stuff. All right, now we're talking. So this is the controller that came in that kit that I bought a year or so ago. And actually this will deliver up to 45 amps, 48 volts or 60 volts. I don't know if this will be able to take it, so we'll see. I don't overly care about this because I've got other motors I can mount to this. And oddly enough, this might be a moderately good just platform for testing different motors. Because to the best of my knowledge, what I've found out is we do have metal gears. We've got a metal shaft going down. Initially, I thought that was all going to be plastic. So We're going to connect all this and see if this can handle this and what kind of results we'll get. But again, how this is all going to fit in here, I don't know yet. For those that are curious what the inside of an ePropulsion Spirit 1.0 battery pack looks like, this is what it looks like. And we're just testing this here. We've got about 51 volts. So we'll make a connection here to our motor and see if it'll fire up. I don't know if that motor is going to work. And the moment of truth. So we've got our positive and negative connected up to our 50 volt or 48 volt ePropulsion Spirit motor. We're running through a 2000 watt 48 volt controller that came with an e-bike kit, and the throttle here that would normally be mounted on the front of an e-bike for that kind of a use. So our key is working here. Let's turn this on. Here's a picture of our e-bike, which we are not installed in here. And we've got a gas gauge. So we turn this and we've got motor. And the air is blowing backwards, so it's actually going forward just like it's supposed to. I don't want to run this for more than just a second here until I check to see if there's actually oil in that unit. And I may replace that prop too, because we've got a little bit of, actually a fair amount of run out on that prop. The aluminum props I've seen on Amazon for about 10 bucks, so I'll probably get an aluminum one. And I do also want to pull it off and just see if the shaft is straight, because that'll be one indication. But so far, we've got progress. I'm actually kind of surprised. I was expecting plastic gears and no oil, quite honestly. So we've got some oil. It's not a lot, and who knows what kind of oil was squirted in there. The gears are metal, which is surprising as well. There's a little bit of run out when this is moving, but I've got some expensive electric motors that also have some run out on the shaft. So I'm not overly surprised at that. But it is interesting that we have metal gears and some oil. We will be adding a lot more oil after we drain out this oil. We've got our bigger controller in here. When this got here with the other controller, this section here, they just had a big zip tie going around here, and I didn't like that. I like to have things as neat as I can, so we just used a great big hose clamp. We've got zip ties holding down some of our wiring loom stuff here, and we're just kind of neatening things up. I'm leaving this temporarily just coiled here because I've got some ideas on a different boat to be able to take the throttle off and mount that on something else. So I'm leaving this extension here, but if this was going to stay on here permanently on this shaft, we could certainly shorten this and neaten that up even more. The next thing here is to cut an open. This is just great. I enjoy reading this over and over and over again. So this was just kind of tacked onto here. We just pop these little nails out. And we need to cut an opening here, cut this kind of grill out, so we've got space for the top of our bigger controller here, because the original one was a lot shorter and it would cover that. It would be nice if this just popped out, but it's kind of molded in here. So probably going to just cut out this plastic grill here, and then we'll design some sort of cover on top to cover the top of the controller there. Well, our motor that was destined for the trash bin or to be torn apart for parts has been put back together, and we're in usable fashion here, usable form. For the top of the cowling, because that controller is larger, this is just a 3D printed piece that's bolted to the top. All of the hardware, all of the bolts, all of the nuts have been tightened up, because they were all loose before. Everything is really, really snug right now, and it's pretty solid. Things are staying where they're supposed to, and it's got a pretty solid, pretty good feel. Our Anderson connectors are all nice and tight here. We're plugged into our ePropulsion 48-volt battery. I did order a new prop. This is the plastic one that came with it. So this was $12 on Amazon for an aluminum one. And this fits really, really well. We're solidly on here. A whole lot less run out compared to that plastic one. We've got new gear oil in here. Really good oil in here. Drained out the old stuff with all the flecks and things in it. Nothing has leaked on here in the last 4 or 5 days since I did it. No drips, no drops. We clear our anode underneath of there fine. And we are good to go. As soon as we get a little break or a little warm up in the weather, we'll take this out and do some tests. Fun stuff. Thanks very much for taking a look.